So, thank you all for coming in tonight. So this particular webinar is on 2020 and beyond, which is pretty much the year ahead. It's the same sort of thing. Some of you may have seen parts of this in the classes, so apologies for the repetition. But for some of you, this will be quite new. So like I said at the beginning, there will be time for questions at the end where you will be able to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you have. This is often considered from some people a scary lecture, but it's not really. It's quite exciting, really. There's lots of things coming up, which we're already feeling the impact of. And so tonight, basically, we're going to be speaking about the looming Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which occurs in January next year. And also what follows from that is the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius in December next year. So, and really, this lecture is about, it's very speculative. So, but I have tried to marry it to previous cycles so we can sort of get some indication of what's going to happen, what we can understand, what's happening now. Yeah, like I said, it's speculative, but I will do my best to answer any questions as we go at the end and make it as clear as possible. So December next year, we will have a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. Now, this has not occurred for over 600 years. And the last transition of this cycle, was going to bring unprecedented change around the world. And we are already experiencing that. The Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, what that is, sorry, I'm just going to, I really need to make sure people keep themselves muted, please. Okay. Sorry. Okay, I don't know what that funny message is, that funny noise is, I'm sorry. So what we're having is the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction will, in Aquarius, will be the first conjunction that is uninterrupted as it moves into the air element. So the Jupiter and Saturn for the last couple of hundred years has made conjunctions in the earth element. And now that's about to change. And I will go through the cycle with you. But this is really going to spearhead us into quite a different society than we know now. Now, even though the last Jupiter-Saturn conjunction happened 600 years ago, the last time Jupiter-Saturn actually went into the air element was 800 years ago. So it's been quite a long time. And of course, we live in quite different worlds than we did 800 years ago, although there are parallels between things then and things now. So I'll be looking at how this may affect us personally in our everyday lives and how this will irreversibly affect us and spearhead us into a new age. And how, of course, it will affect you. So building to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction first, what is this going to be about? It happens in January next year, and we can already feel the Jupiter-Saturn, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn right now. We can feel this right now. We can feel it with things like regulation and new rules, governments desperately trying to regulate things, trying to slow things down, safeguarding, anchoring, and correcting. Regulation in particular with particular industries that are going to be of the more Aquarian nature that we're going to be moving into. And think that industries like that are going to be very very Aquarian. So it's things like Airbnb, it's things that are like cryptocurrencies and um, uh, industries where it's very difficult to regulate. We have issues with Uber in London and New York and Spain and places like that, where it's challenging the status quo, it's challenging how industry operates. So governments are trying to safeguard against this. For anyone who lives in a major city, Airbnb have created lots of, or governments have tried to keep things like Airbnb out because it's detrimental to the estate agent business, real estate business, to the hotel, tourism industry, and things like that. But, you know, this is about Airbnb, for example, is about sharing one's home, which is a very Aquarian thing. And we are moving towards that. But the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is trying to safeguard us against this sort of what could be considered sort of runaway industries. And of course, you know, the Saturn-Pluto in Capricorn is also concerned with walls. Capricorn is about walls. Saturn is about walls. You know, when the Berlin Wall went up, I believe it was a Saturn-Uranus or Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, and then it was dissolved on the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn. So we have walls that want to be erected all around the world. Governments trying to do that. Trump in the US with the Mexican border is probably the most spotlighted one, but it's actually happening everywhere. It's happening in the UK. We have an issue with the Northern Ireland border in terms of Brexit. And, you know, these are not just physical walls either. They're social psychological borders. It's about divide, and almost every country is divided right now. People, for those of you in the UK, you'll understand with Brexit, this is a difficult situation when the population is so divided. Scotland wants to leave the UK. Northern Ireland wants to leave the UK. Catalonia wants to leave Spain. And they're just some examples of countries around the world. And this is building. And this is also trying to regulate and anchor whilst we become a globalized world, a globalized society. These are some of the teething problems that have come with it. Jupiter and Saturn are very concerned about national things. And the Saturn-Pluto in Capricorn is going to try and maintain that status quo. And there's also things like increased policing. Policing is a quite a familiar concept when we think of Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn. And also there's with Capricorn, particularly with Pluto in there is an overthrow of authority. Now we've seen, I mean, I was in Warsaw a couple of weekends ago, and I said to a bunch of astrologers, I don't know much about Polish politics. And I said, I don't know how happy you are with your government. And the response was, well, they all laughed. And, you know, this is everywhere. No one is happy with the government that they have. There are problems, you know, and there's extreme right, there is extreme left. And this is what we would expect with Saturn-Pluto in Capricorn. And of course, let's not forget that Jupiter is going to join is going to join them in the same sign in December this year. So what we have is a massive loss of respect for the government office. I'm sure that the presidential office in the United States has certainly lost a lot of respect in the last couple of years, as it has, well, in the UK, in Europe, South America. Venezuela, for example, things like this. This is about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction building in Capricorn, and it has not peaked yet. It will not peak until January of next year. And another very important, well, there's lots of issues going on. I'm just sort of plucking out a couple here. But the other issue is with an aging society. Saturn is about age. Capricorn is about age. It's about time. And we are, for the first time, going to see the largest population group being over 65 in a couple of years. And that's going to have a massive impact on society in many levels, but particularly from an economic one. There is not enough money in the pot to maintain a welfare system that caters for an aging society, in particular pension pots and housing and healthcare, and that sort of thing. So this is what is going to become a very large issue. There's also other factors that are going to contribute to this. For example, people are having less children. So there's less children that pay into that welfare system that provides these services for an aging society. But I mean, if we look at China, for example, who had decades of a one-child policy, this is one child, or one couple, or one child is actually going to be contributing into a welfare system that has to cater for 4 grandparents, or a couple will. So this is a concern. Excuse me. I have been ill, so I am going to be coughing throughout this webinar, so I do apologize in advance. Now, of course, there is a new generation, and this is very important to note that between 1988 and 1993, those born of that era will have at least 2, if not 3, planets in Capricorn. So during that period, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune occupied Capricorn. Some of them did go in and out, but anyone born in that period is going to have at least 2. Now, this is going to be an interesting generation, not just because the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, or Saturn-Pluto even traveling through Capricorn, is going to transit their Capricorn planets, which is going to be very challenging for them. But it's also interesting to see how this generation will manage the world going forward. This is an interesting generation. I could spend a whole, day discussing this particular generation and how the impact it's going to have on the world. And I do just want to take a minute out to talk about this generation. So this is a generation, the 88 to 93 generation, and some of them before and after. And of course, going forward from that, they set precedent for following generations as well. So this was a generation that grew up on social media, created its own social media, created the demand for it. And having these planets in Capricorn, Capricorn is about parenting. It's about the paternal side of parenting. And, this was the first time really in society in a long time where parents didn't know what borders to put up. We talk about firewalls and things like that, and trying to regulate children on the internet. But this generation was an interesting one because they were new to it. They also were very heavily involved in video and Xbox games and video games and things like that. So this was quite new. And so they've had to sort of create their own regulation as well. And from that, particularly within social media, they've created their own industry. And what I mean by that is things like on Instagram, when you see people product placement and things like that, And that's how, you know, income is generated these days. This is a new industry. This is an example of that generation creating new economies and a new industry. And of course, Capricorn is business orientated, but it's also very status orientated. And we now sort of live in a world where how many likes, how many followers one has on Instagram, or how many likes one gets on Facebook has become a measure of someone's not just popularity, but success. This is a Capricorn concept. And there's also going to be a divide between them and those older than them who don't operate in the same way. And this generation, I mean, if we think about other things that Capricorn is about, and one of the things that concerns me quite deeply, really, is that, you know, Capricorn is about anxiety. It's ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is a planet we would associate with anxiety. And this is a generation that suffers anxiety on a level, really, that previous generations had not suffered or had not addressed at that level. And what concerns me is that, particularly with Neptune and Pisces at the moment, and it's been there, I think, since 2013, we have a heavily medicated generation. We have a heavily medicated generation that is either on anti-anxiety or anti-depressants of some sort, and this is quite global, and it's something that really isn't being talked about, discussed. And if this generation is not on this medication, they've been advised to do so. It's becoming sort of just a natural prescription by health professionals. So moving along is what happened before when Saturn and Pluto resided in Capricorn. There's lots of things. Darby Costello reminded me recently of the Pied Piper story, which I think is very interesting in terms of symbolism for Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn. It's about steering a generation away from their parents. So, you know, there's lots of things that happened last time with Saturn, Pluto going into Capricorn. But one of the things I think stands out for me is Martin Luther in 1517 published his 95 Theses. He pinned it to the door of one of the Catholic churches, and hence the start of the Reformation and the beginning of the Protestant religion. And Saturn was, I think, about 3 weeks from going into Capricorn, which is also very indicative of transition from Sag to Capricorn. But what I think is really interesting about this particular event that correlates with this particular cycle now is that this was the overthrow of the largest governing body on the planet at that time. The Catholic Church ran society on every level, from economics to education to, you know, how people lived. Everything was determined by and decided by the Catholic Church. So this is a very big deal in terms of where we think this may go now. And, you know, interesting also, the Catholic Church has been under quite a lot of scrutiny in the last year or so for a number of things, and also very sad to see Notre Dame burn as it did a few months back, or last month, sorry. But it's been spotlighted. And I'm not saying that the Catholic Church is going to come under the spotlight to the same extent as it did in the 16th century, but there is something very interesting about a shift in leadership and a shift in government, a shift in people's beliefs, um, and um, and the control of society. I mean, Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn, on one hand, is about trying to reinforce the status quo, but it's also the tumbling and crumbling of institutions and societal um, uh, structures that we have lived within for a long time. Um, and, you know, Saturn Pluto in Capricorn is very big brother. It's very big brother. It's like you're being watched all the time. This particular, I feel like Saturn along with Pluto in Capricorn is like having your bank manager, your tax inspector, the police and their dogs, animal and child welfare, your doctor, your nutritionalist, the local priest, all looking through your windows all day and all night. It's like forever being watched by CCTV cameras. That's what Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn can feel like. And you'll see this in music and films and all this sort of thing. Um, this particular year, as we go, as we, you know, come to that peak in January, and you'll see it in all sort of aspects of society, and also the revolt to that, because at the same time, well, you know, simultaneously you have the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius building at the same time, and that's quite different than a building Saturn-Pluto in Capricorn. So this is a chart for the Saturn-Pluto conjunction on the 12th of January next year. This is set for London. Now, for those of you, so Saturn-Pluto is in the 6th house of the UK, and it is there with Mercury and the Sun when it conjuncts. Now, this will be all of you from Europe. It is going to be pretty much in the 6th house as well. There'll be some variations of that. And it will be interesting to look at where that sort of large stellium resides when you set it for your own capital city. And it's also quite interesting to look at where it's going to occur on the world map. So the world map, I'm just getting my drawing instrument, won't be a second. So here we have astro maps here. And if we look at the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, where it sits on the MC on the conjunction is here, and this is Washington, D.C. and New York. And it trails, I need to get another. And it trails, of course, through here, through Europe, Portugal, Spain, through the Africa's countries, and down to South Africa. And similarly this way, through Vancouver, some of the Pacific Islands, and through the capital city of Wellington. Now, which is quite interesting because when the New Zealand shooting, which of course hit home very much to me because I used to live there, my father still does, as do a lot of friends of mine. I thought, is this the Saturn-Pluto conjunction when, you know, so many people were shot in the mosque there a few months back? And of course, it spotlighted our Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, as probably being, you know, one of the only respected leaders on the planet at the moment. And I don't mean to be biased. I get this all the time from people. You know, she was incredibly effective in dealing and managing this. But this is interesting because this is, you know, New Zealand was hit very badly, and in a way never, you know, it was a very plutonic experience. So, you know, and often with a, you know, conjunction of something like Saturn-Pluto, we do experience some pretty horrible, raw, violent things. And what happened in New Zealand may be that is what is going to be remembered from this conjunction. I hope that that is going to be the case, and that, you know, that's where it ends. So now, So, and what I mean by that is Saturn, along with Pluto in Capricorn, will create the conditions of a new society whose foundations are based on freedom, space, and equality, which are Aquarian and very air concepts. So the conditions of this Saturn, Pluto in Capricorn are going to create the conditions for a lot of big change. And for example, our government structures are an example of that. It's going to be quite different. The existing system is not working. I'm just trying to get rid of this here. Okay. So now let's move on to the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction and the great mutation into air. So Jupiter-Saturn have always historically been seen as the basic cycle of change in any social structures, in terms of our infrastructure, in terms of our national arts, be it film, music, fine arts, that sort of thing, our economies, the sports that we, are interested in, our education system, what makes us unique from other countries. That's what Jupiter-Saturn is, it brings about social change. And it spotlights national identity. Now, Jupiter and Saturn are considered the great chronicators, the great rulers of the ages. They spend approximately 200 to 240 years in each element. So the entire cycle of the Great Mutation is 960 years. So Jupiter and Saturn, basically, so their first, so any conjunction, it will take 960 years up to, it can vary, to come back to the same place. Charles Harvey, wonderful British astrologer, said, quote, as their cycle can be considered the ground base of human development, which maps the interaction between the perception of ideas, potentialities, and possibilities, which is Jupiter, and their manifestation in the concrete world, which is Saturn. Now, so we have been living in an Earth cycle for the last couple of 100 years. The first Earth conjunction commenced in 1802 in Virgo. Now, this is also very relevant because this only sort of 30 years before that, Pluto was in Capricorn. So Jupiter and Saturn make their first conjunction in 1802 in Virgo, and Pluto was in Capricorn. And of course, we took the 1770s, not only sort of the foundation for the United States, but also was a very interesting period in terms of the Industrial Revolution, and it created an interesting era, again, unprecedented in human history, mostly based on mass production, which is Earth, manufacturing, Earth. All these things are about accumulation, owning, possession, and now we're about to move out of that. So what happens with the Jupiter-Saturn cycle is it moves through these elements, but before it makes its before it goes from, for example, Jupiter-Saturn have been in Earth, and before they move completely into their air element, they dip into that, and they dip back to the element, and then they have their conjunctions uninterrupted. So we have been living through Earth conjunctions. But in 1980 and 1981, Jupiter-Saturn made a conjunction in Libra. So it dipped forward into the air element. But then in the year 2000, it dipped back into Earth. So what we're about to experience next year is the moving the mutation into uninterrupted conjunctions in the air element. Sorry, I know that sounds like a very mouthful, but I hope that's clear. And so with the Jupiter-Saturn cycle, when it first went into Earth, it was in 1802, but then so it dipped back into fire, the fire element, excuse me, and then it went forward again back into Earth in 1842, which I believe may have been, I mean, maybe some of you can send me something in the chat box. 1842 may have been around the same time as Marxist Communist Manifesto, maybe, which is based on materialism and capitalism. And, you know, it's based on Earth. It's very much Earth. It's about wealth and the unequal distribution of it. So, but yeah, some of you can Google that and message me because I'm not quite sure. But it was around that time anyway. So we've been living in this very Earth, very dense cycle, and this is about to change. The last time in the air element, when they first conjunct in Aquarius, was in 1226. And they conjunct at 2 degrees of Aquarius, and that was 800 years ago. Now, the last time in the air element that they last conjunct in Aquarius and in air was in Aquarius in 1405. And that was at 23 degrees of Aquarius. So the last time that the Jupiter-Saturn made their conjunctions and first into the air element was in 1226, and they stayed there till 1405. And of course, it's interesting to go beyond that and see what happened the previous time as well. Things like the alphabet were invented. There's lots of really interesting things, as you'd expect with air. And Jupiter and Saturn, as I just explained, made a conjunction in Libra in 1980 and 1981. But they will conjunct in Aquarius next year on the 21st of December. And that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, that cycle, will continue until the 31st of October 2040, when the Jupiter-Saturn conjuncts in Libra. And then after this cycle of air, just to sort of give you some background, the next element that the Jupiter-Saturns will conjunct, will come together, is in water. And that will be in the year 2219, when they conjunct in Scorpio. Now, another consideration we have to make as well is that not just Jupiter-Saturn, it will not be just Jupiter and Saturn that, sorry, I'm just trying to clear that, that go into Aquarius. That's going to be followed and widely conjunct as well. Pluto, that's going to be in Aquarius. And Pluto goes into Aquarius on the 23rd of March, 2023. So not long after. It'll go retrograde and back, and then it finally comes through forward ingresses into Aquarius on the 9th of November 2024. It's going to be a very interesting year. And it will remain there until 2044 when it goes into Pisces. So what does this all mean? What does it all mean, going from Earth to air, Pluto going from Capricorn to Aquarius? Well, going back to basics, what makes us earthy? What makes us earthy? Human beings are more heavier than they've ever been, and not just due to obesity and overweight. We are heavier. Just even smaller build people are heavier than humans had previously been registered, which is what you'd expect. It's probably due to diet, many other factors perhaps as well. So we are more dense. We are much more dense. We have more focus on the material. We are concerned. Earth, when you think of second house, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. Taurus is about income. Virgo is about the work that you do. Capricorn is about what you aspire to be. And our whole entire social structure is uh, webbed, completely webbed around these concepts. For example, our education system is occupationally based. Philosophy is not really taught in school. It's something that one would choose to do. There is a lean towards educating someone to accommodate what they might do when they are an adult and how they can earn money and how they can earn more money. That's what Earth does. There's a more focus on the physical. Earth is physical. And of course, we need to feel secure in what we have. We base our lives on our standard of living and we compare it to other people's, other countries, other societies, our neighbours. So our standard of living is such a benchmark in terms of our measure of life. And we want for things. We have security systems such as pensions, life insurance. These are all very Earth. They're risk asset. They're based on risk. What happens if? How am I going to cope if? How am I going to survive? And that's not a criticism. This is how we've designed society. This is how people have been made to think. And society's been organized around that. It's almost impossible to not think of that, or you'd be certainly thought of as out of the box, if you like. I discussed occupationally based education system. So we have a class society that's based upon what we have, not what we know, learn, or think, which is air, and that's all about to change. So the body we focus on rather than the brain. As many of you know, we only understand how 10% of our brain works. There's often a misconception that we only use 10%, but that's not correct. We use all of it, but we only understand how 10% works. Can you imagine when we work out how the other 90% works? So as much as this is quite scary, it's also incredibly exciting. So what makes this eerie? So the shift is going to be interested in people, places, how we think, concepts, ideas, equality and fairness, democracy. Things are going to be measured rather on people who are innovative, inventive. There'll be investments into these areas. Originality, intellectual, thought-provoking. Air is social and communicative. It is also detached, unemotional, and desensitized. Also important to say that Earth is also Earth is female and slow. Air, or particularly Aquarius, is, all of them are male and fast. So when we have this shift, it's going to be very, very rapid. We've been living in this very slow, dense, and we can feel things are speeding up. Air is about being objective and fair, and particularly in Aquarius. Aquarius is future and progressive orientated, whereas Earth is about the present. Earth is about right now, like water is about the past, but air is about tomorrow. So there's going to be this constant interest and investment into the future. But also Aquarius can be very idealistic, very utopian, and may be too idealistic on some levels. So what will become of a focus on a personal level? There's going to be a shift from the physical to the mental. Think of recreation and hobbies. People who want to get outdoors, get their feet on the grass, play sports. This is going to be a shift to the mental. And we can see this already building with that generation that's been on Xboxes and social media and things like that. Even though they're Capricorn and they're earthy, you can see the shift building into a more mental one. How every area of our life, as we know, will transform. The reason we eat 3 meals a day was a design around an eight-hour working day, or even a longer working day, and a Monday to Friday working week. That is not how it was before the Industrial Revolution in the late 18th century. This is very earth concept, how we sleep, when we sleep, why we need this much sleep, why we need to eat at these times are part of our daily routine. This is very earth. Air is not concerned with that. Our work is going to change. I was speaking to a very good friend of mine who's about to set up a new company and offer unlimited annual leave. And when he told me this, I was like, unlimited annual leave? Aren't people going to take the mickey when they can, have as much time off as they want? And he said, and he's very Aquarian as well, he said, no, it's been found that people who have the freedom to come and go in their work are more productive. They produce a lot more. They meet their targets. I mean, if someone does take the mick, of course, they get the sack. But they work their own hours and to their own timetable from wherever they want. This is very Aquarian. It's very air. And the studies he said that he's been looking at, show that people who have unlimited annual leave are much more happier in their work. So now this is going to have an impact, of course, on where we live, how we eat, how we socialize, how we conduct our work. And it becomes a much more independent thing. And, our sleep. It's not just the times we sleep and, how we should sleep at night time. Things like that. It's going to change. And if someone had the choice to forego an 8-hour sleep to be recharged in a different way, would one take it? I would assume if someone was very busy and needed the time, they would. So how we share information is going to change. Communication, language, how we communicate. We already have the technology now that we can talk to someone. I can speak in English in a device. I mean, I can do it on my phone. And it will translate to Mandarin, and the person who's listening to me in Mandarin can reply back in English. We've had this technology for years. We have it on Google Translate. We have it on our phones, on translation apps. We have it on and it's not just the written, it's the written and the verbal language as well. So things like translation is going to just become a matter of course. So language is not going to be a barrier anymore. This is an ear thing. Language, communicating with people is going to become so much easier. So when that happens, I can imagine, it's going to be easier for people to live anywhere they want, where language is not going to be a barrier. Things like that. And our health system. When I wrote Uranus square Pluto, and I spent so much time looking at these two planets in 1965 and 1966, conjunct in Virgo. And I was fascinated with the health industries that came out of that conjunction. And I am one of those people born with Uranus-Pluto conjunct. And so, as many of you are as well on here, as I know. But the interesting thing that's developed from the Uranus-Pluto generation in Virgo is the medicalization of everything. A Virgo is process orientated. And that's what it does best. And everything in our health is process orientated. But we also have very Virgo illnesses or disorders that have developed. Things like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. This is a Virgo thing. Gluten intolerance. Gluten is wheat. The Virgo maiden stands with the sheath of wheat in her hand. And we have a society that's basically given birth to children who cannot, where so many of them cannot tolerate gluten. We also have things like obsessive compulsive disorders. We also have things like eating disorders, which is about perfection. This is a Virgo concept. And that particularly the eating disorders, pretty much came out of the Twiggy era. For those of you, Twiggy was a model in the 60s, a very sort of androgynous, and you may know her now. She's a model for Marks and Spencer and on many TV shows presenting. But initially, she was a very, very thin model. And the Twiggy era she's often considered one of the people who created, body image issues within society. Not that it was her fault, but it's a Virgo thing, and there's lots of Virgo problems, and you can probably think of many yourself. This is going to change to air. So air, when you think of air, when you think of Aquarius, Aquarius rules the iris, it rules the brain. Air rules the central nervous system. And in terms of the medicalization, I am going to come on to something that sort of deviates from the sort of normal of what we're talking about tonight. But it's important because I want to give you all an idea as astrologers of what you may be facing with future clients and grandchildren, if you want them, or if you, maybe not be your choice, but you know what I mean. Housing in our home, Earth is about bricks and mortar. Bricks and mortar. So, air is not about bricks and mortar at all. It's about disposable things. It's about, sorry, I'm just going to turn somebody's camera off here. Sorry. So think about the innovations in architecture. When Pluto went into Capricorn in 2008, there was quite a new innovations in the UK, because we're a bit short on space here, and houses are a bit squashed up in urban areas. But what was interesting is people excavated down into their basements and started building basements under their houses. Which was interesting. Well, and that was, of course, also consequential of the economic crisis in 2008. And, of course, people couldn't afford to move. So they built, so they went under the house, which is a very Pluto and Capricorn concept. Now, if you think of Jupiter-Saturn in Aquarius, followed by Pluto, well, we're going to go to the sky. We're going to go up. We're not going to go down. This is air. And also where we live. Aquarius does not necessarily like living with their family. They like to live with, people that are like-minded. They're driven by like-mindedness rather than blood relatives. And food. I mean, I do think it's my own personal opinion, but, one of the foods that has become such an industry since the earth element is sugar. I mean, it was eaten, but only really by sort of elite, aristocrats. But sugar has become it's had quite an impact on human beings, I think, which is perhaps why we're the densest we are at this point in time. Imagine if you didn't have food or you didn't need to eat in the way that you do now. And this is sort of, you can see food changing on quite a mass scale, particularly with veganism, vegetarianism, um, the younger generation wanting to eat in quite different ways. And I'm going to talk about that a bit later. But also our relationships. Our relationships are going to change. We're about to move into an air element, and so this is going to be very interesting. And again, we can see this already happening with the acceptance of, the very late acceptance of gay marriages, but also maybe some of you young people here can help me out here. But I'm not sure how to pronounce it. The what do we call it? Where three people are in a relationship, three people live together, or three people go out. This is very Aquarian. And, of course, those who are born of Uranus, Pluto, and Virgo go, oh, that's, they very critical of that. But this is very Aquarian, and this is how things are already changing. People do not define themselves by heterosexual anymore because it's such a label. So we need to prepare ourselves. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes break. It is 25 past. I'm just going to be a couple of minutes, get myself some water. So please feel free to get refreshments, toilet break or whatever. And I will see you all back here in about 3 minutes, if that's okay. Thank you. Okay. Just checking. Okay. So, hopefully you're all back. Okay, so what will become our focus on a more social level? So what we're going to find is we're going to be interested in others rather than things. So people rather than possessions. Interestingly, Bob Marley has an unaspected sun in Aquarius. And Aquarius is very much about one people, one world, one love. And we're going to see a lot more of that. One world order, which I believe Trump's already trying to start, but I'm sure he'll be stopped with the Saturn-Pluto building. He's hoping. Astronomy and astrology are going to be, they're ruled by Aquarius. They're ruled by, Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, which is the sky father. So anything to do with the sky is going to be of massive public interest. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Technology, of course, technological advancement. We're just, we're at the very, very start of a massive technological revolution, which pretty much started in 97 with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. That happens every 13 years, I think. And, that was when the first internet browser came out. But we're still at the very start of technology, things like health, that sort of thing is going to be quite interesting. How we communicate, particularly with other creatures on the planet. For those of you who saw the movie Arrival, it's quite interesting, about a linguist who had to learn how to talk to aliens. I'm a bit of a movie buff because I find that movies are very reflective of what's going on at the time in society, and I found that movie quite powerful in that it spotlights how human beings are unable to talk to other creatures. I mean, cats only meow to humans. They don't meow to each other or to any other creatures. And there's a lot of animals and creatures on this planet that talk to each other. And as humans, we're we don't do that. We can't do that. That's going to become an interesting area, I think. Constant stimulation, constant. This is air. We're going to be information overload. Relationships, personal, family, social network. Our community is already now redefined by social media rather than our neighbours in the street that we live on. That's going to become more so. I mentioned architecture, going into the sky, and perhaps more merging with the sky rather than, Earth being very obvious. Air is not so much. How we learn, what we learn, is going to become of focus, and I'll talk about that in a minute as well. Social conscience. Aquarius has a very strong moral compass. So, and you can see this now. I think there was a soldier that was tried in Ireland, I think it was. Sorry, forgive me for my ignorance here. But he was tried for something he did while he was in something orders that he was given, and he was found guilty, and it caused a bit of a public outcry. But I thought this is, Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn is very much about the sins of our fathers. And moving into Aquarius, there's going to be address to that. And I sort of have a little concern that all the things that have been done before, there's going to be some punishment of. Anybody that, who, we can see this now with things that are particularly tied up with equality. So anyone who may have made a racist comment 20 years, 50 years ago, or was homophobic, there's going to be a bit of a movement, I think, to punish. This is a very Saturn Capricorn thing, but it's I'm not quite sure where that's going to end. And death. you know, death, Saturn-Pluto in Capricorn is also going to bring up this issue of death as well. Because, you know, Saturn Capricorn is the Grim Reaper, if you like, and it's a reminder of our mortality. And it's also a subject people aren't really comfortable talking about. And, you know, it's not easy to talk about wills with people. You can't say if I die or when I die. Things like that. So this is going to become more of an area of interest, I think, to us as a society, how we are buried or not, or how, you know, there's not enough space. This is an earth issue moving into air. I'm not saying that people are going to be rocketed into space, but there's going to be an interest in death and what happens after you know, after we pass away. And it's also important to think about the Capricorn generation, 88 to 93, with the 2 to 3 planets in Capricorn. They're going to ask questions on, you know, this. They are born with this Capricorn quest. So things like heaven and things like reincarnation are going to be brought to the table for discussion. Capricorn likes proof. It needs proof that these exist. So there's going to be, I think, quite a shift from, you know, those very Saturnian structures and very earth structures we've sort of been living by, or, and as the Aquarian age will say, confined by. And procreation, you know, or the control of it is a very, very big deal to me. And it's part of my lifetime research, really. Well, about 27 years now I've been researching childbirth. And I just want to share some of that research with you, because this is very important, both in terms of humanity going forward and as astrologers. Part of my research was looking at 90,000 births, and these births were of 4 hospitals in the Bristol area in the United Kingdom between the years of 1990 and 2008. Now, this particular table you're looking at here, or graph that you're looking at here, is looking at, when you see here the method of delivery, that breech, elective cesarean section, emergency cesarean section, von Toos, sorry, there should be an H there, spontaneous, forceps, and other. And I'm interested in looking at the dates and times that these babies are born, as I'm an astrologer. And what we are seeing is a very strong lean towards babies being born between, well, certainly at 9 o'clock in the morning, but certainly between 9 and 5, which is here. Sorry, terrible annotations here. This is better. So this is 9 o'clock in the morning. This is 5 o'clock in the morning. So we're seeing a peak with this. Now, this, of course, is attributed to the rise in elective cesareans. And when I say elective, you know, also emergency now as well. Even twins are considered a problem. So again, the assessment of risk, older mothers, things like that. There's many, many, many reasons why this is happening, which I don't have time to go into. But I do need to say that this is not a United Kingdom phenomenon. It is a global one. The rates now in the UK, I think, are about 64% of babies being born Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And even those that are looked at spontaneously are now starting to be born between 9 and 5 because they're organized to be so, thanks to the Uranus, Pluto, and Virgo generation. So in 1990, the average age of mother was 24.9. From that point, that that age increased. Now, if you take 24.9 years back from 1990, you get to exactly the Uranus-Pluto conjunction in Virgo. So those mothers decided to delay motherhood. Fair enough. They're work-orientated, Uranus-Pluto and Virgo. There's no criticism of that. What I'm basically saying is there's less children, smaller families, and the organization of birth, the medicalization of birth, the process, one might say conveyor belt. And, you know, there's a lot of literature on, you know, control, which in some ways there is, but it's also that Uranus-Pluto generation, both as mothers, fathers, and health professionals, trying to organize these particular births. I interviewed many mothers as part of this research, and it was interesting the narrative that came forward from these mothers in terms of describing what they wanted, particularly those born in the Uranus-Pluto Virgo generation. Words like, I wanted the room to be sterile, I wanted to be organized, I wanted to know the sex of the baby so I could organize it when it was born. These sort of things. These are Virgo, from the Uranus-Pluto Virgo in the 60s. But now we have this sort of dilemma where around the world babies are predominantly being born 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, even spontaneous deliveries, because they are given, for example, oh gosh, now I've lost the word. You know, they are induced by tablets at midnight, so they come into labor at 9 o'clock in the morning, things like that. So there's a lot of and you know, waters are broken and things like that in mothers to speed up the delivery, but that's sort of administered in a way that births are now born 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Now, as astrologers, that should be quite concerning for us, because what you have is you have, sorry, I'm just trying to clear these annotations. I don't know how to, oh, here we go. What you have in the Western, well, and like I said, this is not just actually the Western world, it's everywhere. Madras, Shanghai have 45% cesarean sections now, and it's concerning for Madras and Shanghai. They're the only places in India and China that are recorded, because people want their babies now to be born on auspicious days. Brazil has a 75% cesarean section rate. Cities like London, Rome, Paris, Sydney have similar birth rates. Where you have places in Holland where there's a very tiny cesarean rate, these are more midwife-led societies. They are, you'll find that the birth distribution across 24 hours is a little bit more equal. But what we have, when we have all these births being born between Monday to Friday 9 to 5, is we have a predisposition for Sun, Mercury, and Venus to be in the top part of the chart, of the natal chart. Now, there's nothing wrong with having Sun, Mercury, and Venus in the top part of the chart. And I also want to say there's nothing wrong with having a cesarean section either. But this is the consequences of organized birth. So when you have Sun, Mercury, Venus in the top part of the chart, you also have an absence of Sun, Mercury, Venus in the bottom part of the chart. And of course, this affects rulerships of every chart and of every, you know, the chart ruler, the ascendant, and every house that follows. Makes a difference if you're more of the traditional lean for nocturnal, diurnal charts, Arabic parts, that sort of thing. And of course, it all depends, you know, sun ascendant combinations. And this is a table I drew a few years back. And this is what, these are the sun ascendant combinations that are not going to be randomly born anymore. So for example, here, oh, this is in red, so it's not very good. So this, you know, where the crosses are. So being a Virgo sun with Leo rising or Cancer rising, things like that, they're going to be eliminated. The question marks here, these will be, these may be still strong dominant. That depends on short and long ascension. And for those of you who don't know what that is, don't worry about that. It depends on where you're born. So for example, I was born in New Zealand. I'm Pisces rising, as is so many other people in New Zealand. Conversely, in the UK, there's more Libra Scorpio risings, or in Europe, in fact. So this will make quite a difference to our population. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with having a population with, well, there's nothing wrong with having Sun, Mercury, Venus in the top part of the chart, because 9 to 5, if you think of it, 12th house to about the 8th house, and most strongly 12th house. And of course, because Mercury and Venus, their orbit is so close to the Sun, that they will have a more stronger predisposition to be in the top part of the chart as well. So there'll be much stronger 12th house populations. When I first did my pilot study in 2003, I did my pilot study when I did the Bath Spa Masters on Cultural Astronomy and Astrology. And I did it on 193 births. And what I found with these, and basically these 193 births in this pilot study, I was looking at when they were born. All these people were born by cesarean section, but I didn't have many other variables. I didn't really have any other demographics like age or gender, you know, what sex, socio-economic situation, or anything like that. So, but what was interesting is when I did this pilot study, there were very little 9th house suns. I was using Bernadette Brady's software on Jigsaw and looking at putting it into houses, and I thought, why is there no 9th house suns in this? And then of course it became quite clear to me that this is the lunch hours of obstetricians. And then when I did an analysis of day of week, Friday afternoons were a lot less than any other time of the week too. So, you know, one can get into the fate aspect of this, but it became clear to me that obstetricians' diaries were had a huge bearing on when a baby would be born, and therefore what their astrological signatures would be. So to come back to what will be of focus, procreation, that's what I'll leave it at that. And really all things airborne. So when I say airborne, things like pandemics, weather, our atmosphere, our ability to manipulate all of that, hopefully clean up the mess in our atmosphere, will be a focus as well. But our ability to understand the sky is going to be quite wonderful. You know, it's you know, we don't ever, not many people look at the sky anymore, but it's going to become quite a focus with when we move into Aquarius, Jupiter-Saturn, and then followed by Pluto. This was 2005. This is the first solar flight between Japan and Hawaii that was run by solar energy, no longer reliant on those very earth resources. This was in the Telegraph in May 2016, so over 3 years ago, that this particular, oh, you can't see that, it's the, sorry, it's the hypersonic rocket that's designed to travel from Sydney to London in 2 hours. But then we get the antipode. Now the antipode, this was in the Telegraph 2 years ago, that is being designed So, and that can fly you from London to New York in 11 minutes, from New York to Sydney in half an hour. So, you know, it's going to be quite a different world we live in. I think of my grandmother who traveled on a boat. It took 6 months from England to New Zealand. And, you know, thinking of the trains, planes, and automobiles that she saw. And, you know, we're going to be living through quite radical changes in aviation. And this is, if you Google this, it's actually a really funny video, and it's very cool, actually. If you just Google BBC Man in Reading, that's Reading, not reading, Reading, and that was about 18 months ago. A man in the UK designed his own suit, and you can watch him fly over this lake. And this is going to be, you know, people are going to be very invested in this, very invested. People are going to want to fly. Now, Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, the Sky Father, and we're going to be very concerned with aliens. And you know, I do worry that we'll be quite feared. You know, there'll be a lot of fear surrounding that. I think it was it Arthur Thomas, AC. Oh gosh, oh dear. Clark. Oh God. What is it? Arthur Clark. Oh gosh, I'm terribly sorry. It's completely lost me. But he said that if we are alone in the universe, or if we are not, both of these concepts are equally frightening, and they are. So our preoccupation with space and the sky and aliens and life on other planets, because Aquarius is interested in our place in the larger scheme of things. So the larger scheme of things is going to be the universe. So it's going to be interesting in terms of what comes out of that, in terms of culture. I remember my uncle who wrote for Greenpeace when I was a child, and I remember him saying that the only way you'll ever get every race, creed, and color of humanity to hold hands is if there is a threat of aliens. And you know, I still remember him saying, I was very young, and it had quite an impact on me. Hence why I remembered it. But I agree with him. That is when we will have equality. So there's going to be quite an interest in that. I'm going to speed this up because I know that we're running out of time, and I want to leave 5 minutes for questions. So a period dominated by space travel, seeking out our place in the wider scheme of things. Technology. Mark Miller said to Eric Drexler, who's the nanotechnology man, about this particular period. He said things are going to be different. No, I mean really, really different. And that's what I think too, with us moving from the earth to the air, going into Aquarius. If you just look at point 3 down here, if you Google definition of singularity, the technological singularity is the hypothesis that the invention of artificial superintelligence will abruptly trigger runaway technological growth, resulting in unfathomable changes to human civilization. Now, this particular man who sort of defined this is Ray Kurzweil. He has 13 honorary PhDs from Ivy League universities in America. He was advisor to 3 American presidents. And he has been given lots of money over the years to develop the concept of singularity. Now, these are his books, and I do particularly the middle one is very interesting for those who are interested in where artificial intelligence may take us. But what he believes is that uploading a human brain means scanning all of its salient details and then reinstating those details into a suitably powerful computational substrate. This process could capture a person's entire personality, memory, skills, and history, the technology for which will be available by the late 2020s. And that's from his book that I just showed you. So this is pretty scary and exciting stuff. And for those of you who remember the Matrix, if we can download software, of course, we can also upload, which if we can upload other aspects of people's skills and talents and things like that, then that's going to be quite have quite a remarkable impact, for example, on child development. If you can imagine a 3-year-old that can speak every language, you could have an engineering degree. So, okay, now I'll take you back to, I'm going to look at what happened in 1221. In the last time, sorry, when Jupiter-Saturn made their conjunctions into the air element, and its first conjunction was in Aquarius. Now, what was really wonderful about this era, excuse me, Alfonso X, King of Castile, so he reigned from 1221 to 1284. He's a fascinating character. So he was one of the most pivotal leaders of the world, or certainly the European world, during this period, and he still has an incredible impact on the world today. His let me just hold on. Go forward first. And he was an astrologer. He was known as the wise one, the old wise one. He was known as the astrologer, besides just being the King of Castile. And he devised sort of the first ephemerae in large text that he did, but he also created full works on astronomy and astrology. Excuse me. And the influence on people. So this was pretty huge in in this period. But he was an interesting character on many levels. What he did is he got Catholics, he got Muslims and Jewish together. He took the Bible, the book of Kabbalah, the Quran, and the book of Hebrew, and he asked all these people to design a universal language and a universal constitution. Excuse me. Now that's quite interesting, given that this is very Aquarian. What an Aquarian concept. Universal language, but taking into account everybody's beliefs, everyone's language. Excuse me. So all these people tried to design the language of Castile. Excuse me. So this was unsuccessful because it was too highbrow, as it would be. It's Aquarian. So it couldn't be understood by everybody. It was far too intellectual. But out of that, the language of Spanish was created. Sorry about that. I'm just going to have some cough syrup in a minute. So the language of Spanish was created. And of course, that language of Spanish was the most dominant language throughout the world up until 2 decades ago. So this was interesting, but he also tried to, with his universal constitution, interestingly, King Alfonso X, his painting hangs in the House of Representatives in the United States because they borrowed so many of his wonderful universal democratic concepts. So this is the sort of thing we will expect again. Excuse me, I'm just going to get some cough syrup. Better? Sorry about that. So this is interesting when we look at him. And another person from this era is Saint Francis of Assisi. He was canonized, I think, 2 years after his death. And also just as Jupiter-Saturn had made its conjunction into Aquarius. Oh, terribly sorry. I've lasted this long, but I've only got a couple of minutes to go. Saint Francis of Assisi had a love and commitment to poverty. He was anti the earth concepts. If you see any paintings or statues of him, they're often with birds. Interesting. Very Aquarian. Birds are Aquarian. Excuse me. He considered animals his brothers and sisters, and he claimed he could talk to them. He cared for them, and he cared for nature and humans, all things equal. Very Aquarian. Gosh, it's terrible. I'm terribly sorry. He was also an advocate for vegetarianism, which we can see is growing. And the Assisi International Animal Institute, which is about talking to animals, is very strong in the United States. Francis of Assisi died of an eye disease. Again, very Aquarian. Going back to the animal thing, he talked to animals, and like I said at the beginning, we're going to have a strong interest in talking to animals. And I think when we do that, we're going to find it very hard to eat them. And that's going to feed into, mind the pun, of society going more and more vegan. And I say that, and it's quite interesting. I mean, I'm not vegetarian. I was many years ago. But, you know, thinking of dairy, we are the only creatures on the planet that drink milk after we're weaned, which is rather strange. And today's Pope, Pope Francis, he took the name of Francis of Assisi because he loved his commitment to poverty. This is interesting. Pope Francis, and I'm not Catholic, but I did go to a Catholic school for a bit. And I have many friends that are Catholic, but interestingly, you know, Pope Francis has a lot to say about the change in society. Quite, you know, he's quite open-minded, I think, compared to those who have gone before him in recent decades. But the fact that while Jupiter-Saturn goes into Aquarius, the Pope, you know, we go back to that, you know, previous periods, has taken the name of Francis because of Francis of Assisi, who died 800 years ago. So these are the transits of Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. As you can see, only 7 degrees from Pluto. This is set for the UK. But again, we see they're not that far on because it's at 0 degrees. Again, going through similar places as it did before. A little bit different in Europe. It goes through London. And so this is something you can think about later, perhaps. So really, I just want to finish with, excuse me, 2 quotes. One on Aquarius, and by Spock, the most Aquarian person I can think of. From Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. But I do think we need to be reminded that the shadow of Aquarius is a test of the morality of a society, is what it does for its children. And that was said by Dietrich Bonhoeffer and also reiterated by Nelson Mandela. So we need to be mindful of that, I think. So I have been talking, and really I think I've run out of everything to say, so I'm going to finish there. But I am happy for one or two questions without you all unmuting yourself at the same time. Perhaps you could type in the chat box if you're interested in a question, asking a question, and I can dedicate a couple of minutes to that if that's okay for everyone, just to stay a couple of minutes longer, or if they wish, they can leave if they want. That's fine too. I mean, do feel free to unmute yourself if no one else is talking, so please feel free. Anyone? Have I put you all to sleep? Can you go, Marlena said, can you go over some of the other downsides? Well, you know, I mean, they're endless, to be honest, Marlene. They're really, they are endless, the downsides. Well, I mean, and someone's downside is someone's, you know, upside as well. You know, a woman said to me when I was talking about this, she said, I don't want to live through this. I don't want to live through this. And I said, yes, but if I said to you in 1995 that in 10 years' time, every kid at school will have a mobile phone, you would have thought that would, you know, I said, but it's happened. It's happened. It's not disastrous. And, you know, it is what it is. It's neither really good nor bad. It is what it is. And I personally think it's quite exciting. The downsides I showed you with the procreation is something that I will continue my research on. So really, that's about it. Candice, thank you, Candice. Robert, I wonder about the fixed nature of Aquarius. Yes, certainly. Yes, that's another. If it leads to a certain inflexibility, dogmatism, re-Aquarian values. Yes, no, absolutely. Yes, it is very fixed. And yeah, whilst, yeah, I mean, I sort of say, well, in my own mind, I mean, for those of you who understand Star Trek and you think of the Borg, you know, connecting to everybody, and that, you know, nothing is private really anymore, but also the inflexibility of that. So whilst we try to do good, we do get very fixed on that. And yes, you're right, Robert, that's exactly what there is, an inflexibility with Aquarius. Yeah. Certainly, and I think that will come through with, you know, punishing the older generation from the younger one. Thanks, Evstathia. Salvador, thank you. Oh, wonderful. Well, that's great. Now, for anyone else who you know, there's Zeynep is doing a lecture next week, so you know, do enroll on that if you wish to. Wendy. Why is Aquarius related to eye disease? Well, I mean, Uranus rules the iris, or Aquarius rules the iris of the eye. I'm not sure why, but yeah, I'm not sure why. I think I used to know why, but I can't remember. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I'm sorry, Wendy. Who else have I got here? Oh, thanks, Utenti. Evangelia, hello, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to sign off now. I will send you this recording tomorrow, and it will be available for a week. In the meantime, have a great night. Take care, and hopefully see you all soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.